Skull from Evile. We're going to be talking about this album today, Nation, and we're going to be talking about a little bit of heavy metal royalty with this record and with this review. And this is principally in who this band has worked with in the past, who they have worked with currently. I really want to bring up one name before we talk about this album review, and that's Flemming Rasmussen. That's who produced the first album by this band. And that is a huge name because within the realm of thrash metal, we of course know that Flemming Rasmussen was in a very, very important part of the 1980s for thrash metal icons Metallica, considering he produced the Ride the Lightning, the Master of Puppets, and Justice for All albums. And really, you could say that it was their departure from working with Flemming Rasmussen that could be in one part responsible for the change of sound. Of course, also along with siding with Bob Rock, though, I mean, that remains to be seen, really. Flemming Rasmussen also had worked in an early 1980s Rainbow album, amongst others, and really this band, Evile, has gotten a lot of attention from the very get-go, from album number one, principally not only because of their sound, but also because of working with a talented producer, a long-time producer, someone who has been very important to the world of thrash metal. And these guys produce and play a hybrid thrash metal that is very reminiscent of the old school of the 1980s, but does at some points in time infuse a little bit of death metal in there. Now that's something that is absent from Skull. That is something that is absent from this record. This is something that is more of a principally old school, Elder Scrolls thrash metal attack, which is fantastic whenever you think about somebody who just loves thrash metal as much as I do. Really, on paper, whenever you look at this album, whenever you examine what this album speaks before it even plays a single tone, it looks like something that would just be eaten alive from a guy like coverkillernation. A guy like coverkillernation who really grew up on thrash metal whenever he first got into the genre. A guy like coverkillernation that still, to this very day, has a very fond appreciation for thrash metal. And thrash metal, of course, over the course of the 2000s and the first part of the 2010s has had a fantastic revival with a lot of new bands propping up and really making a lot of noise, and also with the re-emergence of a lot of classic acts that are doing things that are extremely meaningful. Bands such as Testament, Creator, Exodus, just to name a few. You know, and of course Teutonic Thrash has had probably one of the best revitalizations perhaps in metal history, considering the latest offerings from Destruction and Sodom and Creator and also Tankard have just been incredible, just been phenomenal discs. But now let's talk about Skull. Let's talk about this affair. This is one that, you know what I really hate, before I even get into specifics, I really hate whenever you go to do some research on an album and find out all the different versions that there are, and there's like 4 different versions. Like, each and every person who's going to be releasing this album needs to have a specific version with a specific bonus track or two, whether or not you're getting it off of iTunes or if you're going, you know, somewhere else. Or it used to be back in the day where it was just a Japanese bonus track. It was just something that the companies always did, and, you know, there was, of course, a lot of parodies based on that, you know, Big in Japan, you know, and, of course, the Fozzy story where they were huge in Japan and nobody in the United States knew about them because of that. And, you know, it's one of those things where this has happened a couple of different times now, and a lot of times it's become just demos, but every so often you get an actual new song from this. However, with this, if we don't want to go with bonus tracks, this is a 9-track affair, and this is definitely, wow, that was pretty metal. This is one where the average track length is usually going to cycle anywhere between 4 and 5 minutes, bordering closer to 5, with the longest track being about 7.5 minutes. And you might think to yourself, wow, this is kind of a little bit resemblant to Master of Puppets. It's a little bit resemblant to Justice for All. Perhaps Overkill's The Years of Decay, where there's a little bit of overindulgence going on with these track lengths. Well, let me remind you that The Years of Decay is my favorite Overkill album. It's a phenomenal, and very experimental disc. And also Justice for All, after following such a success for Master of Puppets, also showed a little bit of an experimental take on things as well, albeit silencing Jason Newsted's bass to the point in which you don't even think he's on the record, but we're not here to talk about that. This record seems to have all sorts of timestamps and date stamps littered all over it, and that's something that actually makes this smorgasbord actually a great treat, but at the same time can also sometimes bog it down. This is one where the riffing definitely speaks a lot towards bands such as Exodus, some 1990s era Overkill, and of course that latter era, maybe more And Justice for All and Black Album era Metallica. But the one thing that I see a lot, especially with the soloing, that is a welcome change, that is a fantastic, fantastic fixture, and something that really makes this band really stand out to a lot of people, is it sounds very much like Rust in Peace era Megadeth. And the speed, the proficiency, the tonal quality, everything just really seems to scream this. And that's a very, very good scream to really have in your corner, as weird as that sounds. As far as the construction is concerned, you could really label each and every one of those bands once again. There's not any sort of chaos that's going to remind you of Slayer. Sorry, guys. Anybody who's a Slayer fan, you know, cool that you just got Paul Brostep back into your ranks and stuff like that. Really sucks, you know, for those who are now gone. But, sorry, Dave. But this is, you know, not something where you're going to see that. This is extremely clean. This is very well produced, and it has a lot of, you know, very tart and tidy qualities to it. Now, as far as the vocals are concerned, they are done in a, you know, very exquisite fashion in the fact that they are going to be both accelerated and also slowed down. And there's a little bit of a snarl behind there that you really hear with the throat, and that's something that gives these guys a little bit of a uniqueness to them. I mean, it's not something that we've necessarily not heard before. However, in this newer crop of thrash metal bands that's coming up and coming around, this combination, while it is, you know, it really channels on a lot of classic qualities, is something that kind of, whenever you put it all together and amalgamify it, it becomes very, very unique and very cool. Now, as far as by comparison to their previous affairs, it's not as though this band is making leaps and bounds, you know, of change and really hurdling everything that they've done prior in order to create a magnum opus. This is instead an album that really seems to fit along the bill of previous affairs such as Five Serpents' Teeth and etc. However, it just seems as though this one was packaged together a little bit more neatly. It has a little bit more of a cleanly sound to it. This really, in a way, almost feels like an And Justice for All type of album, where it does have the little bit of length, it does have a little snarl, it does have creativity, it does have variety. But there's just something about it that just kind of prevents it from really being seen as the absolute quintessential album from Evile. And I think what it really is the fact that while the songwriting is terrific, and there are a lot of moments where you are, you know, very tempted to have your, you know, just release your jaw and let it fall onto the floor, it's not something that happens consistently, and perhaps it's because many people are getting used to this out of this band. Perhaps there was a little more variety that needed to be done in order to really captivate audiences, and maybe it's the fact that this album does seem to have a relatively high quality of polish to it that actually can be more of a turnoff than it actually is a positive, whereas a lot of people like to embrace a little bit more of a dirtier sound to their thrash. I really like this disc for a multitude of different reasons. I really like the history that's behind it with the sounds that you hear. I really like the songwriting. I think it's very, very well done. And I also like the fact that even though some of these tracks are bordering on 7.5 minutes, this album does not feel as though it is an overindulgence of all of their strengths, and really an attempt to try to, you know, put in as few weaknesses as possible, because whenever you go to do that, usually you end up discovering new ones. Instead, I like this album because it does have a tidy quality to it, but at the same time, it does feel very bold. It feels as though they've kind of smashed through a couple of boundaries already, and now they're kind of reaching a level where they're not sure what boundary really is next, or if there really even is a next boundary. Or perhaps the boundary just hasn't been reached yet. They haven't discovered it. It's still uncharted territory. I think that they've done a phenomenal piece of work for that which what they already have, and they've made do with the classic elements that have made these guys very, very good, and have certainly made them seem by a lot of people to be one of the best, if not the best, new thrash metal bands out there today. I gotta give this album a solid 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed the experience. I really wish I would have listened to this before I listened to Super Collider, but I'll be honest, had I done that, the review of Super Collider may have gone a lot worse than it did. And let's face it, that review was a bit of a train wreck. So, to avoid a secondary train wreck, to avoid another train speeding into the station and crashing without any sort of boundary, well, we're going to end this right here, and I'm going to end it by recommending that you check out this album, Skull, and I am definitely going to say that I will see you next time. Peace.